weekly chart shows the same thing. You have all this kind of sideways chop here, all this kind of area here. The one thing I would say is if we do break 30, the next big level for me would be this area here, this kind of retrace to this area where you have these lows connected to these lows. And that actually brings us to maybe, I mean, you know, kind of the best case scenario for me would be a move up to 43, 44,000, at least in the near term. So that would be the bull case. To me, again, you know, I look at this bigger chart, and this happens to be the midpoint of this M pattern, and you can even see the A on this chart, right? Here's your M, and then here was your little A pattern. So I mean, it's a classic MA pattern. And then this is just a retrace to that middle point, which is so common. Like if you could look at stock charts, commodity charts, all these charts, when you get this pattern and it retraces, this tends to be, this is my key level. So for me, if it were to get above this area here, let's say 30,500 is kind of that line in the sand, down sloping line, flat line. So if we were to stay above this for a certain amount of days and really start establishing it as a support level, then I think you have to say that the low is probably in, right? Based on that. Now, if we gets rejected here and we start breaking some of these technical supports, then I do think that things could get nasty very, very quickly, especially if we see the stock market take a big.
Yesterday, Bitcoin finally broke the 30,000 price level, and now the bigger question is if it will hold it for a few days or struggle to keep up. We must remember that this is a massive level for this asset. For the past few years, it acted both as a strong support and a strong resistance, and many investors who bought here in 2021 are probably exiting their positions now at break-even. So, in this video, we will have Gareth Soloway from InTheMoneyStocks.com and VerifiedInvesting.com make a new price prediction and explain how he believes Bitcoin can go to 43,000 next if it holds this support. So pay close attention until the end to know what may happen in a bull or a bear scenario for Bitcoin. And by the way, in case you're wondering, the original interview had this background music we can't remove, but you can still take value out of this curated content. In case you're hearing Gareth for the first time, this is how he positions himself as a trader and how he acts in the markets.
So yeah, for me, it's much more short term, where I'm just trying to kind of hop in and I'm hopping out. For me, I've kind of gotten to that point where it's almost impossible for me to be a long-term investor because there's too many cycles of up and down movement where, like, you know, it's a good example would be Bitcoin. It's like Bitcoin's at 69,000. You might be a hodler, but if you know it's going to collapse, and I made that call that it was going to go to 20, why wouldn't you exit at 69 and just rebuy at 20 and save yourself a massive amount of loss in that scenario? So
now let's have a look at Bitcoin, what's happening and what's coming next.
And actually, I mean, here, I'm going to get rid of some of these trend lines because it's a little confusing here for people. But one of the things I'm watching very carefully is you basically have Bitcoin now just, number one, piercing the even numbers. So I'm not sure in trading how much you pay attention to even numbers, but I found in trading that, number one, the retail investor puts stops at even numbers. So number one, generally those stops will get taken out because the algos will pierce them, which will then take out the short stop. And ultimately it gets max euphoria, right? When you see all of a sudden a 3 instead of a 2 in front of Bitcoin, 20,000s to 30, it just creates that like, oh, I got to get in now because here goes the run. And those usually denote short-term tops. But then also what I think is fascinating on Bitcoin is that you have so much former trading areas right in this 30,000 level, right? So if we look at the bull market from 2021, when it dumped out, this was the low. So psychologically, and you can see it right over here too, before it broke down, that was a huge level. So it makes sense that right around 30,000, this is going to be a major psychological level for Bitcoin to try to get through. It doesn't mean it can't pierce it, like you said. I mean, it's already pierced 30,000. But for me, this is the big level to test, whether or not can it get above this level and then can it hold above this level. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so this is my key level. So for me, if it were to get above this area here, let's say 30,500 is kind of that line in the sand, down sloping line, flat line. So if we were to stay above this for a certain amount of days and really start establishing it as a support level, then I think you have to say that the low is probably in, right? Based on that. Now, if we gets rejected here and we start breaking some of these technical supports, then I do think that things could get nasty very, very quickly, especially if we see the stock market take a big leg down, the risk off trade start to come back in. So to me, this is a huge level. For me, psychologically, like there's got to be so much. I mean, just think about this. Like, think about the people that bought Bitcoin here, and then they thought they were just, going to print money to 100,000 to beyond. And then they came back, they're like, okay, I'm break even. And all of a sudden they find themselves back in. So there's a lot of those people psychologically that'll say, okay, this is a level, I'm back to even after being down 50%. Let me exit the trade at this point. So it just creates a lot of resistance.
What if Bitcoin can't hold this 30,000 level and goes down again? What's the bearish outlook Gareth is seeing?
So basically, at least for me on the charts, this was resistance right here around this 28,700 level, right? We kept on piercing it, and then finally we've moved through it. So what's interesting is, and you know this from technical analysis, is when you break resistance, it now becomes support. So now on the way back down, let's say it gets rejected at this 30 and change level, this now becomes support. If it gets through there, then this level now becomes support. So there's a bunch of supports that were established because of all this sideways consolidation. So it's going to take a hefty sell to get us back through that. That's where things get more interesting. If we do get rejected and we get through this area, you then start trading towards the 25,000 level, and eventually you can retest some of these lower levels. But for me, yeah, I mean, right now, I'm a trader that is very focused level by level. So I'm looking to see, okay, well, what happens here at 30,000 and change level? And if it gets rejected, do we break this level? If it breaks, well, then the next level is right here. And I'm just kind of a step-by-step trader in that respect. And again, that's part of the shorter term mindset of what I do. It's just like, okay, that's been broken. Now you look for the next one. And if that one doesn't get broken, then you look and kind of focus on that.
But if it holds, the actual pump can take us to this level instead.
So again, weekly chart shows the same thing. You have all this kind of sideways chop here, all this kind of area here. The one thing I would say is if we do break 30, the next big level for me would be this area here, this kind of retrace to this area where you have these lows connected to these lows. And that actually brings us to maybe, I mean, kind of the best case scenario for me would be a move up to 43, 44,000, at least in the near term. So that would be the bull case. To me, again, I look at this bigger chart, and this happens to be the midpoint of this M pattern, and you can even see the A on this chart, right? Here's your M, and then here was your little A pattern. So I mean, it's a classic MA pattern, and then this is just a retrace to that middle point, which is so common. Like if you could look at stock charts, commodity charts, all these charts, when you get this pattern, and it retraces, this tends to be a major stopping point in the retrace of the bounce. And also, just one thing, and I'll just point this out before you say something here, is that the other thing to look at too is, I mean, the bullish sentiment in Bitcoin is bothersome to me, because I've never known something to make a bottom where people get so bullish so quickly. And that's also something that kind of concerns me. And when you look at this bigger chart, right? I mean, it's a great bounce. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Bitcoin's up 100% off the lows. But let's not forget, in 2018, we hit 3,500 and we bounced back 300% to like 10,000. And that was still a bear market. We still, ultimately stayed in the lower ranges for quite some time before we really broke out.
Gareth has been saying for a while that for Bitcoin to create its lows, it needs this.
And one of the things I keep on watching for too is the regulation, right? When do we see the regulation be unveiled for the crypto markets from the SEC? We're seeing, I think Binance got sued recently. I mean, there's so many different lawsuits that are being pushed out, but I want to know the regulation. Like for me, that's one of the reasons why I can't put a ton of money in Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency yet. I mean, I certainly have small dabblings. I do swing trades. But for me, it's like, okay, well, if you don't know the rules of the game, how do you play that game, right?
But does he believe crypto will still trade regardless of what happens to regulation?
I do. I just wonder how do altcoins, more than anything, Bitcoin to me is fine. In Ethereum is fine. It's more the question of what happens when you have to have quarterly reports from some of these, I mean, when the books get opened on some of these crap coins and you get to see behind the curtains, what does that do to some of them? Does that cause a panic? Do we see I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons a lot of these will go away. Maybe all of a sudden you get this type of like pull the curtains back, and then investors are finally like, wait a minute, there's nothing there.
Can Bitcoin get to 43K next? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to get notified every day for more awesome daily crypto content, please leave a like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. Thanks.